Hey, come see us in Ashland, Virginia, Athens, Georgia, Irvine, California, and Ontario, California. Go to jimmydore.com for a link for those tickets. We have a special guest with us. It's Whitney Webb. She's been a professional writer, researcher, and journalist since 2016. Really? Just 2016? You've done all that already? From 2017 to 2020, she was a staff writer and senior investigative reporter for the MinPress News. She is a contributing editor for Unlimited Hangout and author of the book One Nation Under Blackmail, about the connection between the U.S. intelligence services, organized crime, and Jeffrey Epstein. Please welcome back to the show, Whitney Webb. Hi, Whitney.
Hey, Jimmy. How's it going?
It's going good. And I know I asked you this before, but you have never considered calling yourself Whitey.
No,
Okay.
but sometimes where I live in South America, people sometimes drop letters from my name by accident, I assume. And so I may have been called that a few times. And also Winnie.
No
Winnie
kidding.
It's also unflattering. So it's all right.
Winnie.
Comes with the territory, I guess, of having being named after a popular 80s singer.
Yeah, well,
Thanks,
you're
Mom and Dad.
Whitey Houston.
Yeah.
Winnie is from that show. What was that ABC show? Remember the voiceover all the time? I can't remember the name of that show. But anyway, I used to like that show, actually. But anyway, it's probably before your time, Whitney.
Savage was on
Probably.
it.
Yeah, what's his name? Savage?
Yeah.
What's his first name? Fred Savage. Yeah, he was on. What was that big show he was on?
I'll remember.
The Wonder Years?
The Wonder Years.
Look at you, girl.
Maybe not too much before my time. I
Yeah,
don't know.
okay.
I don't really remember it beyond like a few names.
He had a big crush on Winnie. That was his crush. But anyway, you wrote this article. I want to get to it real fast over at Unlimited Hangout. It says debt from above, the carbon credit coup, and sweeping across the shores of Latin America. That's my favorite part of America, Latin America. Comes a scheme. Nobody speaks Latin though. Comes from a scheme from some of the most predatory figures in the venture capital ecosystem of the United States. It's a brazen attempt to assert foreign influence across Latin America and threatens to reshape the very fabric of the region and the day-to-day lives of its people. I remember when who was George Herbert Walker Bush's vice president? Dan Quayle said he was glad he paid attention in Latin class so he could speak to the people in Latin America. And and when he went to the Arctic, he was hoping he could speak articulately. Anyway, that's a Rich Seisler joke. At its core is a serpentine set of contractual obligations held at the municipal level, cast throughout Central and South America, upheld by an intelligence league satellite company, and controlled by a private sector consortium of greenwashed financiers aiming to turn the region's forests into equity and carbon credits. What the...
It's a very...
what is going on in Latin America? And this is another... Under the umbrella of climate change, fighting climate change? Is that what this is?
Yeah, so that's part of it. It's really a very complex effort that brings together a bunch of different players under the umbrella. It's this umbrella program that they refer to as Green Plus. It's nominally about imposing carbon markets under the guise of decarbonizing at the municipal or rather local level throughout Latin America. So instead of negotiating with national governments, they're going directly to municipalities, which in Latin America, it's very, very easy to influence them relative to even like national level politicians. So essentially what's happening is that the goal of this is to have all of these localities in Latin America essentially monetize their protected areas by turning it into carbon credits that will be managed by this group of organizations and companies, not the municipalities themselves, and they'll be allowed to receive some money that these carbon credits generate. But they're not the ones actually managing it, the local governments that are signing on and lending their protected areas to the production of these carbon credits. And basically part of the plan here is to have all of these protected areas, or essentially, this really these entire municipalities, if you look at what some of the people in the press releases say, by the satellite firm, which is chaired by Steve Mnuchin, Trump's Treasury Secretary, who's now deeply involved in Israeli intelligence front companies like Cybereason. Trump's Joint Chief of Staff, Joe Dunford, also on the board. Argentina's richest man, Marcos Galperin, who runs Mercado Libre, which is deeply, deeply tied up with PayPal and the so-called PayPal mafia, which includes people like Peter Thiel and Elon Musk and all of these guys, which are also making big plays in Argentina right now under Javier Milei. And essentially,
I saw, by the way,
satellite company. Oh, sorry.
I did see Elon Musk tweet out that the place to invest is Argentina. Right now, he's all into. So he's in bed with Milei, the new president there, right?
They're quite cozy. Yes. Well, part of that is because Elon Musk is very desperate for lithium for Tesla-related reasons, and Argentina sits on the lithium triangle with Bolivia and Chile. And so Milei has essentially given a large amount of lithium already to Israel or an Israeli company, and presumably Musk is seeking some of that lithium as well. And he's also attempted to do that in Chile.
Oh, okay. Okay. So I'm sorry I interrupted you. You were saying?
No, it's fine. But anyway, aside from those people on the board of the satellite company, the people that created that company are Argentinians, but they're former contractors to U.S. intelligence, to the NSA, to DARPA, the Pentagon, and they're directly partnered with Peter Thiel's Palantir, a contractor for the CIA. And that was created with InQtel money, and also Elon Musk's SpaceX, which is tied up with Space Force, an intelligence and military agency, which Peter Thiel is also tied up with. So under the guise of saving the planet, this intelligence, essentially like front company, the satellite firm with all these like predatory Trump guys on the board, like Steve Mnuchin, who should have been prosecuted for like the 2008 financial crisis, but wasn't by Kamala, is on the board of this, and they're like allowed to spy on these areas in Latin America under the guise of protecting it.
So that's
one component of this program. There's several others that are also very bad, which is why it's such a big piece.
So,
to say really quickly, I co-authored this article with Mark Goodwin, who's editor-in-chief of Bitcoin Magazine, and so this was co-published by Unlimited Hangout and Bitcoin
I used to
Magazine.
love that. He used to make some of my favorite game shows in the 90s, Mark Goodman and Bill Todson Productions.
I think this is a different
different Mark Goodman? I used to love categories. Anyway, you say here, one of its key ambitions appears to be further entrenching the debt load of the region through the multilateral development banks and the dollarization of the continent from the subnational level up through carbon markets upheld by a digital ledger. So this is like akin to IMF fuckery, right? So
so Larry Fink and Mark Carney and a lot of these ESG bankers and billionaires have said that the only way to, quote unquote, stop climate change is to reimagine the World Bank and the IMF.
I was right.
So the way they're reimagining that right now, the IMF and the World Bank for a long time have been rightly criticized for basically using debt slavery in the global south to have them privatize off all their state assets and give it to foreign corporations.
Let me just explain to people how they do that. So what the IMF will do is they'll come into a poor country, and they'll say, hey, we're going to give you all this money, and you could, do whatever you want with it. And then, of course, they know they'll never be able to pay it back. And so when they don't pay it back, they go, hey, you got to sell us your public land, your public space, your public works. You got to privatize all that and give it to Western corporations. And so that's their way of that's their version of their neoliberal takeover of smaller countries. Is that a good explanation of what they do?
I think it's fair. There's a lot of different ways to, in different case studies to look at, right? But places like Argentina are a really good example. That's a really good example of a country that's been totally wrecked by the multilateral development banking system, which, by the way, the IMF, the World Bank, intimately tied with U.S. empire. The U.S. military even admitted in documents that were published by WikiLeaks that they're financial weapons of the U.S. military, the IMF and the World Bank. Yeah.
So
now what they're doing instead by reimagining them is that they're taking U.S. empire out of it and they're having it basically be a direct weapon of the bankers. So instead of the bankers like buying up U.S. politicians and influencing U.S. empire and getting what they want that way, they're reimagining it to basically create this new economic system that we've seen bits of over the past few years. The idea of programmable, surveillable money, and also this idea of a voluntary carbon market. The goal of which is to have it be voluntary in name only, not unlike digital ID and all of that stuff. So if you want to know more about this, you can look at the Glasgow Financial Alliance for Net Zero that was created by Mark Carney and Mike Bloomberg, which somehow the UN decided were the best people for the job of saving the planet. They're in charge of climate finance for the United Nations. The stop and frisk New York mayor billionaire from Salomon Brothers, Mike Bloomberg, and the former head of the Bank of England and Bank of Canada and former Goldman Sachs guy, Mark Carney. That's who's saving the planet for the UN. They're the ones reimagining this, the whole multilateral development banking system. And part of this involves this carbon market play where the World Bank, along with Google and some other actors, are developing climate wallets for people.
Tell me about a climate wallet.
Well, they're designing it. It's designed to run on, I believe, the Chia network, which is the guy that invented BitTorrent, his new project. And they claim to be sort of like a net zero blockchain, I guess. And basically the idea of it is for people to participate in the carbon market to come. And the idea of people being able to sort of like monetize nature. And there's a whole lot of stuff going on with carbon credits and carbon markets right now. And it's a very murky legal area. And I'm very concerned about it because there's this whole mentioned but relatively unexplored issue of so-called carbon rights, where the person that buys the carbon credit can get rights to the carbon in the forest the credit represents. Does that make sense?
Yes.
So like, I buy a carbon credit in this forest, this Colombian rainforest, and now I am potentially the owner of the carbon in those trees, so I can decide what happens to that carbon. And the people that actually like own the land, or like Colombians, they don't necessarily own it anymore, potentially. This is like this murky gray area, so it's opening the way up, I think, to some land grabs in the global south. So a lot of very disturbing things happening in carbon market land, and even under the idea of reducing CO2 levels and all of that. The carbon market, as it's been functioning, just hasn't done that. It's been criticized by people on the left and the right. And then there's been time and time again, it's been revealed by even mainstream media that up to 90% of all carbon credits on the market right now are completely worthless and meaningless. So it's basically like the junk bond scandal of the 1980s again. And what's interesting is that the person that invented carbon markets and carbon credit trading is a guy named Richard Sander, who worked at Drexel Burnham Lambert, the junk bond scandal bank of the 1980s. He was a senior vice president until he was brought in by the George Bush Sr. administration to apply free markets to environmental issues for Bush Sr.'s EPA, and then was contacted by this like Rockefeller oligarch guy who was at the UN named Maurice Strong to develop the same solution for carbon. And he's also the father of derivatives of financial futures, which of course helped explode in 2008. So the guy that invented all of that is the guy that invented carbon credit trading, and he also wants to make a market just like that for free water and free air, so you can, get basically taxed on that too.
So we covered a similar stories to this. They tried to create something like this on Wall Street, and somehow it failed, or they couldn't get the approval. I can't remember the story exactly, but here you. First of all, what you're describing sounds like, if you're going to make a cartoon of evil financial things, they always put it behind, they always couple it with, we're saving the planet, we're helping people.
With altruism.
Yes.
They claim to be altruistic. Even Sam Bankman-Fried did that of FTX, right? He was the face of effective altruism.
Yes. That's right.
Right.
Yeah, he was
They
gonna,
always
he was going to give all his money to charity and everything. He just drove a regular car. He didn't care about things. He wanted
what
to
a
help
great
people.
guy. Oh wait, it turns out it's other people's money
Yeah.
and not his money.
Well, here you write, you say, astonishingly, every capital city of Latin America has eagerly signed on, apparently unaware of the strings attached to these seemingly benign partnerships, while a majority of municipalities in the region have also made commitments with these same groups that will push them to join Green Plus, potentially in a matter of weeks. The hopefully well-meaning regional governments have unwittingly paved the way for a sweeping surveillance apparatus tied to American intelligence that threatens to erode privacy and civil liberties under the guise of progress and combating the climate crisis. Well, hooray for Western imperialism once again. They've figured out how to screw over everybody while enriching a handful of people and making everything worse.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's pretty fair to say. And I think a lot of this we're going to be seeing going forward, this push to have economically destabilized countries in Latin America turn towards dollar-denominated stable coins. Like that's happening in Argentina, for example, because of like the issues with the peso there and how it's been devalued so much, even under Milei. People are flocking to dollars essentially, but like stable coins, either like Tether USDT or Circles USDC. And this whole crypto ecosystem in Argentina is pretty much, largely managed by this one particular network that's intimately tied to the satellite company I was talking about. They're all tied up with this group called Endeavor, which Endeavor has an Argentina branch. They have branches really all over the world. They're based in the United States. Their board is chaired by Edgar Bronfman Jr. of the Bronfman family, which, if you're familiar with my books, is intimately tied to organized crime and basically the people behind Justin Trudeau. And another person on their board is Reid Hoffman, who's the co-founder of LinkedIn, who was a member, part of the so-called PayPal mafia. And probably the closest person in Silicon Valley to Jeffrey Epstein. So
the whole it seems like the whole Western world is run just by straight up criminals and con men.
Yeah,
I mean, from Justin
absolutely.
Trudeau to obviously Joe Biden, but there's and that people think that. Now, do these group of people, are they also opposed to Donald Trump? Because I know the establishment donor class in the United States is opposed to Donald Trump because he won't do exactly everything they want him to do. He does most of it. So would you surmise that these people also don't want Donald Trump, or how would you look at it?
Well, Reid Hoffman is a big funder of sort of Democrat causes and the Democrats, but other members of the quote unquote PayPal mafia are very much supportive of Trump. For example, Peter Thiel was a big force on Trump's transition team, people that worked very closely for Thiel and Thiel's Palantir, basically directed all the early policy decisions and appointments of Trump's Department of Defense. And there's been a lot of connections, I think, still between PayPal mafia and Trump. And you have someone like Elon Musk also sort of posturing publicly anyway as a libertarian and sort of in that right populist camp. So I think this particular network has people who sort of play to both sides of the political machine, which is frankly, if you want to get lots of lucrative government contracts, I mean, that's what you do,
Yeah. Oh, definitely. So, So where do you see all this ending up in 5 or 10 years? Where do you, are you good at that? Can you make a prediction?
I mean, I can try, because frankly, it's hard to know where we will be, but I think it's pretty clear that there's certain efforts to push people in a particular direction. So I think it's been clear for a long time, and as I'm sure you're aware, there's a push to onboard everyone to a digital ID system. Vaccine passports during COVID were a big part of this. But there's been all sorts of pushes for it. For example, WorldCoin, Sam Altman, scan your eyeball, get a unique digital ID in a wallet you can have tokens in. people in the global South that they're basically being bribed to give up their biometric data for the guy that runs OpenAI with Microsoft and stuff. There's these digital ID initiatives are consistently tested on vulnerable stateless people, but the goal is to have it rolled out globally and to have it be interfaced with a digital wallet where the money is programmable and surveillable. So a lot of people have been talking about CBDCs, central bank issued digital currency. But there's also going to be digital currencies just as surveillable and programmable that are issued by the private sector and the Wall Street banks. And that isn't being talked about enough. Right. So one of the stable coins I mentioned earlier that people in Argentina are being rapidly onboarded to because their currency is being destroyed, Tether recently onboarded the FBI and Secret Service to its platform.
Jesus.
So everyone that uses Tether gets to use their money under the watchful eye of American intelligence, essentially. And those same actors, the FBI and the Secret Service, are part of this public-private partnership housed within the World Economic Forum. It's basically U.S., Israeli, and UK intelligence, plus a lot of big banks and PayPal. Their ambition is to end online anonymity, and with that, also financial anonymity. So we're seeing unprecedented crackdowns on, financial privacy tools, both for cryptocurrency and for regular transactions, and big pushes from all across the internet, really, to have you tie your government-issued ID to what you do online, whether it's your social media account or really anything. And so the goal here is to have, create a completely surveillable system based on biometrics and with money that the government or whoever can directly program and surveil. So programming it means that you can only use the money for what they say you can use it for, and you can only send it to who they say you can send it to.
So,
in all of
so
that.
If people, are having a hard time wrapping their heads around this, so what this is they're just going to make it easier to do to everybody what they did to the trucker protest in Canada. And
yeah, I think a lot of that was, trials to see how much pushback they'll actually get for this kind of stuff. I mean, the goal is to onboard the whole world onto that. And they consistently test this stuff first in a global South. On the global South. So what this article is about is a big effort to essentially wrap up a significant amount of Latin America by focusing at the subnational level, the local level, onto these kinds of systems under the guise of we must decarbonize now.
Yeah.
But really if you look at sort of the fine print, I guess you could say, of this program, the decarbonization funds go toward a specific company that's tied up with this particular group that's trying to build an intercontinental power smart grid from the Americas, and they've been testing their smart grid in poor communities in Latin America, in Los Angeles, actually, in the U.S., and also in Colombia and some other countries, with the idea of having it all tied together and having energy be currency. And the idea is to move away from currency as we know it now, and have all these commodity-backed currencies, and that people trade energy or trade carbon credits. And basically, it's complicated. There's a lot of different reasons for why they're moving in that direction. Part of it is because of the insane amount of debt that the world is saddled with. You have to park that debt in certain places. You have to find ways to manage it, right? And so, some of these stable coins are being used for that. Carbon credits are being used for that. Actually, RFK's vice president, Nicole Shanahan, was running or managing a project at Stanford Law that was about using carbon credits to facilitate quantitative easing, which is, the endless money printing by the Federal Reserve. So there's been a lot of, efforts to look at what they're going to do with the debt. And essentially, they have to remake the financial system. But they're, making it in a way where it's, completely surveillable and controllable. And these are really the ambitions that the U.S. national security state had right after 9/11 and tried to impose on everybody. Total information awareness, for example, was a program that they tried to enact. And there was a big uproar about it at the time in 2003, 2004, because even the New York Times and stuff knew that it was going to completely eliminate privacy for the average American. And so The ambition of this program was to surveil literally everything, including people's like health signals, to prevent pandemics before they can happen. To prevent financial crime before it can happen, to prevent terrorist attacks before it can happen. It's pre-crime. And Total Information Awareness was recreated as a private company in 2004, right after Congress defunded it, and it's provably Palantir, which is Peter Thiel's company that contracts to every single U.S. intelligence agency. They privatized it because they realized if they can frame it as a private company, people won't complain. People will give their data freely to the private company. So Peter Thiel doesn't just make Palantir, he also makes Facebook. And they build this network of companies. And now Palantir, for years, has been testing predictive policing in urban communities in the United States, really testing it all over the world now. And I'm kind of concerned they're going to make a very big comeback with Trump, because some of the main people in developing those policies for Palantir, when Trump was in office last time, they were very intimately tied up and served in the Trump administration. People like Trey Stevens, for example. And Trey Stevens created a company with the Oculus Rift guy, the VR headset guy, Palmer Luckey, that used to work, that got, thanks to Peter Thiel, sold his company to Facebook, and then like got more Thiel funding. They're building the smart wall for Democrats and Trump, because Trump doesn't want like an actual physical wall anymore. He's all in on the smart wall. And on a recent campaign stop said, we need a biometric entry exit tracking system for everyone. That's how we're going to stop, illegal migration and all of that. And one of his campaign lawyers is going on podcasts saying we need to use biometric face scanning to vote as voter ID. We need to scan our eyeballs. Woman? Yeah, Alina Habba.
Okay. All right. So I think we have actually a story loaded up to talk about the wall. So let me stop you here.
Sorry.
Let me stop you here for a second before we get into that. And let me just ask you. Go ahead.
To summarize, then, really quick. Basically, the goal is pre-crime, and that's why they want to eliminate financial privacy and privacy in general online, and know everything you do.
So this is like. When I was in high school, I read the Brave New World and 1984. This is like both of those things.
Sure.
Wouldn't you say?
Yeah, I think that's fair to say. Yeah. I mean, ultimately the goal. So take people like Larry Fink, for example. Larry Fink is on record saying markets like totalitarian governments.
Correct.
Markets like dictatorships. That is why in the 1980s and the 70s, the CIA imposed military dictatorships on Latin America, because that's what the market liked, because they, the whole idea of like the Reagan administration, for example, and other administrations too. But like when a lot of these coups were happening and these military dictatorships were being propped up, that's who was in power. They wanted certain economic policies imposed on those populations in Latin America. And they didn't want interference for the CIA to do drug running in Colombia and these other countries. Of course, Bush Sr., when he was CIA director, was very involved in all of that. And so in order to get people who will be amenable to those policy decisions that are in the interests of the CIA, but not their national interests, you have to impose authoritarian governments, right? That's why you had them back people like Manuel Noriega, Pinochet in Chile. I mean, really, the entire continent was pretty much in dictatorship or in a state of brutal war. And I think there's a big goal here to have U.S. empire really clamp down on Latin America for this new, global turf war between the West and BRICS and whatnot. The U.S. doesn't plan to have the dollar die and be dethroned. They plan to bring it back in a very significant way with these dollar-denominated stable coins. And other tools they have at their disposal as well. So to think that like the bankers in Wall Street are just going to like drift off into the night without a fight, these guys have been saddling countries around the world in debt for a very long time. They're remaking policies from either at the UN or at the, the World Bank, IMF levels. These institutions have enormous influence, and they have every intention to keep the debt slavery model going. But because of, economic realities, they have to reinvent that system. And that's what we're seeing right now.
It's really mind blowing, and people, I know people think voting for Democrats or Republicans is going to change anything. It's so funny to me.
No,
I know.
unfortunately, it's not.
No. Hey, come see us do a live show. We're going to be in Denver, Colorado, May 11th, Los Angeles, California, doing a live panel show with a celebrity panel and video, Ashland, Virginia, Athens, Georgia, Rutherford, New Jersey, with Max Blumenthal, Minneapolis, Minnesota, Ontario, California, Irvine, California, Chicago, Illinois, with another celebrity panel, live video show in Chicago, and Grand Rapids, Michigan. Go to jimmydore.com for a link for tickets. jimmydore.com for a link for tickets.